Welcome to Revenge Report. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more. Let's dive in. I was already sweating through the back of my shirt, but I kept my arms folded and my face calm. Greg sat across from me in a cheap plastic chair, leaning back like he owned the damn room. His Rolex caught the light every time he moved his wrist, which he did on purpose. His suit was expensive, his cologne strong enough to sting my eyes, and he hadn't stopped smirking since the detective walked out 10 minutes ago to grab the report. "I gotta say, Tanya," Greg said, with that slick, performative laugh he always used when there was an audience, "you've officially lost it. What's next? Aliens?" He shook his head. "You were always a little off. But this is sad." I didn't say a word, just stared at him, steady. Let him talk. You get canned from another temp job and suddenly you're a crusader? I mean, you've been spiraling since that breakdown. What was it, 3 years ago? 4? He leaned forward. "That therapist of yours clearly ain't working. Quick note, before listening, share which city or country you're watching from." I kept my mouth shut, let him hear the echo of his own voice bounce off those dull beige walls. The door creaked open. Detective Kramer stepped in, carrying a yellow notepad and a tired face. He glanced at me, then at Greg, then took the seat next to the recorder. "All right," Kramer said. "Let's just walk through this. Tanya, you reported Mr. Harris for falsifying VN records connected to a vehicle involved in a fatal crash on August 3rd, correct?" I gave a small nod. "Yes." Greg groaned like he was being asked to sit through an infomercial. "Detective, come on, this is nuts. She's bitter, she's unemployed, and she watches too much damn Netflix. Now she thinks I'm some criminal mastermind." Kramer scribbled something but didn't comment. Greg spread his arms. "I'm a small business owner. I run a legitimate dealership. I pay taxes, I donate, I've won awards. And she, what? Lives above a laundromat and stalks people online for fun?" Still, I said nothing. He thought he was running the show. He gave me this pitying look. "Tanya, what exactly are you doing with your life right now? Seriously. Besides writing fan fiction about your cousin, the car dealer, that one almost got a twitch out of me. Almost." I locked eyes with him. Let him finish digging. Just then, Kramer clicked his pen and turned toward me. "Do you have evidence that ties Mr. Harris's vehicle to the accident?" I looked at him, calm. "Yes, I do." And I sat back in my chair, watching Greg blink like he'd just stepped on a landmine. Greg blinked, but that smug grin didn't drop. Not yet. He leaned back again, crossed one leg over the other like we were just two cousins chatting over coffee instead of sitting in a police precinct with a homicide report between us. I didn't flinch. I'd seen worse liars crack in half with less pressure. And Greg? He'd been training for this moment his whole life. Every damn family gathering was his stage. I couldn't count how many parties we had at his house in Short Hills after he made it. The man cut a ribbon for his second dealership like he was opening a children's hospital. Balloons, champagne, red carpet, a DJ. He even had the mayor show up once. My mom brought deviled eggs to that one. She tried to act like it was a potluck, like we belonged there too. Meanwhile, I was the cousin who never stuck around long enough to get mail. "Where are you now, Tanya?" "Oh, just moved again? What is that? Chicago this time?" "Still figuring it out, huh?" They'd laugh. I'd smile. Play the role. Thanksgiving 2 years ago was the worst. Greg stood up at the head of the table, cutting into his turkey like he was carving a statue of himself, and raised his glass. "To hard work and real jobs," he said, winking at me. "I mean, Tanya's still scanning barcodes at 39. That's commitment." My mother laughed, not loudly, just enough to not be the one who didn't laugh. No one asked what I actually did. I cleared plates in silence, pretending I hadn't just been wrapping up a 2-year op embedded in a charity scam out of Queens. I'd just dismantled a shell company funneling federal grant money to offshore accounts. But sure, let's talk about barcodes. When I left that assignment, I was ordered to shut it all down. New name, new job, cut ties. "Live like a civilian." "Fully," my supervisor said. I told the family I got laid off. That's what the report would say too. Position eliminated during restructuring. Simple, plausible, normal. My mother repeated it to everyone. At church, at the grocery store, to her bridge club. Tanya's between jobs again. Poor thing. That was it. Narrative locked. I was the failure they all could pity. The proof that not everyone makes it. Greg became the family's golden boy. Every Christmas, he handed out gift cards like he was Santa Claus. People clapped when he gave Grandma a trip to Atlantic City. He bought her a motorized recliner. "I take care of my people," he said. Sure, as long as the cameras were on. They didn't notice how I never brought a plus one, never drank more than a sip, always parked 2 blocks away, always left early. I wasn't cold, I was cautious. Because if I slipped up, if I showed even a flash of what I really knew, someone would start asking questions. And questions meant paperwork. Paperwork meant exposure. So I smiled, ate the turkey, took the jabs. Greg loved that. Being the star, the successful cousin, the guy who did it right. Business owner, husband, 2 kids, house with a pool, 6 cars. The kind of life you could post about without raising red flags. And me, I was the ghost in the corner. Until today. Back in that precinct room, Greg pulled out a toothpick and started chewing it like he was prepping for a damn GQ photo shoot. "You know," he said, glancing at Detective Kramer, "I think Tanya's always had trouble figuring out where she fits. She's been kinda lost. Like, forever I looked at him. Nothing in my face, no heat, no twitch. Just the calm of someone who already knew how the story ended. Because I'd let him be the golden boy. But now I was going to watch him burn." Greg kept chewing that toothpick, tapping it against his teeth like he was bored. Like this was just a speed bump in his perfect little life. But I wasn't looking at him anymore. I was back in his garage, morning after the crash. I'd stopped by to drop off a care package from my aunt, some stew, banana bread, a bottle of ginger ale. She'd asked me to swing by since I was already in the area, said Greg was home but probably busy with work. He met me at the door in joggers and a hoodie, holding his phone like it was glued to his hand. "Kitchen's open, just leave it on the counter," he mumbled without looking up. I walked through the side gate like I'd done 100 times, passing the pool, up the 3 back steps, and into the kitchen. His house was always spotless, too spotless, like it had been staged for a real estate brochure, the kind of place where nothing looked lived in. I dropped the bag on the counter, turned to leave, and then I caught it. The garage door was open a few inches. Most people wouldn't have noticed, but I'm not most people. I walked down the hallway and pushed the door open. The SUV inside was a brand new white Range Rover. Top trim, custom rims, no plates yet, and it was wrecked, not totaled, but damaged in a way that didn't sit right. The front right headlight was cracked straight through, deep scratch marks ran up the hood like claws, and just above the wheel well, crusted into the paint, was something dark and sticky. Blood. That's when my stomach dropped. The night before, I'd heard the scanner report about a hit and run in the South Ward. A cyclist dead on scene, jogger DOA at the hospital. Witnesses mentioned a white luxury SUV, no plates. Took off northbound. I took 3 steps closer and crouched. Blood near the tire, a smear down the bumper. Someone had tried to wipe it, but not well. I stared at it for 5 full seconds. Didn't breathe, didn't blink, just stared. Then I stood up, backed out slow, and closed the door. I didn't confront Greg, didn't ask questions, didn't touch my phone. Just walked out the front gate like nothing happened. He was on a call in the living room, shouting about some client who was pulling out last minute. I gave a wave through the glass, got in my car, and drove. But every inch of that SUV was burned into my memory. The scratches, the smeared blood, the curve of the dent, the model year. I trained for this. For 12 years, I'd walked into rooms like that and cataloged the evidence without touching a thing. People think going undercover is like in the movies. Guns, wigs, action scenes. It's not. It's keeping your hands in your pockets when you want to scream. It's memorizing tire treads and timing patterns. It's knowing how to play dumb in a room full of people who think you're already irrelevant. Greg thought I was a nobody, so I used that. The next day, I started digging. DMV records, dealership inventory, his fleet registration. I cross-checked purchase dates, VIN mismatches, digital footprints. One file at a time. Greg had been using shell accounts to offload damaged inventory, register them under new numbers, and sell them like they were clean. I flagged one vehicle with a forged title, then another, and another. Every breadcrumb pointed back to him. And that wrecked Range Rover in his garage never showed up on his books. He never reported it stolen, never filed an insurance claim, just tucked it away like no one would notice. But I did. "She's making all this up," Greg said, tossing his toothpick in the trash like the conversation bored him. "Always been like this. Craves attention. Doesn't matter if it's good or bad as long as someone's looking." Detective Kramer raised an eyebrow but didn't respond. He just sat there, pen in hand, watching both of us like a teacher waiting for a student to lie on a test they helped write. Greg leaned forward like he was offering something helpful. She's never held a steady job. I'm not saying that to be mean, I'm saying that because it's true. Look it up. She's never been anywhere longer than 6 months. She's got a history of instability. I didn't flinch, didn't blink. She still lives in that dumpy studio over the laundromat on Rose Street. That's not a crime, I guess, but come on. She's pushing 40 and still couch hopping and working temp jobs. Doesn't that tell you something? It told me he hadn't paid attention in years. That studio, I lived there while I was embedded in a tax laundering ring tied to 4 different strip malls in northern Jersey. Place reeked of fabric softener and stale popcorn, and the ceiling leaked when it rained. I had one chair, no TV, and a mattress on the floor. From my tiny window, I watched the target every night walk across the parking lot to his vape shop/money funnel. But sure, let's talk about my apartment. Greg shook his head and gave that disappointed older cousin look he'd been perfecting since we were kids. I'm not trying to be a jerk, but this is just sad, man. She's bitter. Things didn't work out the way she wanted, and now she's trying to make me the bad guy. It's like her version of a comeback story. Kramer glanced at me. Still no comment, just watching. Greg leaned back in his chair again, arms crossed like he was done. Look, I've always done well. I'm not going to apologize for that. I've built something, a life. Maybe that's hard for some people to accept, especially when they're stuck. Wherever she's stuck, I could have spoken up, could have corrected him, but I didn't. He needed this. His little monologue, his version of me, the loser cousin who never figured it out, the family flake, the tragic little side character in the Greg Harris origin story. He never considered that maybe I liked being underestimated. Honestly, Greg said, turning back to Kramer, this whole thing, it's just Tanya trying to stand out for once. That's it. One big story so she doesn't feel invisible anymore. Still no reaction from me, but inside I could feel it. How close he was to the edge and didn't even know it. He thought this was about feelings, about me being jealous or insecure or whatever trash he'd been telling himself for years to justify his lies. He had no idea the math was already done. Kramer finally spoke. You said she's never held down a job? Correct, Greg said, almost proud. Not a real one. Kramer tapped his pen against his notepad. And she lives above a laundromat? Still does. Always has. Kramer didn't look at me, didn't nod. But I saw something shift in his posture, a tightening. He wasn't buying it. And Greg? He didn't even notice. He was too busy clinging to the character he'd created. Me, the unstable loser. Until the next 5 minutes took that story and lit it on fire. Greg must have sensed it, the shift in the room. But instead of backing off, he doubled down. Look, I'm not trying to be cruel, he said, palms up like some preacher delivering hard truths. But Tanya's not stable. I mean, everybody in the family knows it. She had that thing a few years back. What was it, that breakdown? He looked at Kramer like they were bonding now. Like maybe the detective would lean in and say, tell me more about her mental health. She cried through my whole wedding, he added. Did she mention that? Like not just a few tears, full-on shaking, mascara running meltdown. My wife thought it was grief or something, but I told her, this is just how Tanya is. She lives in her own little world. He glanced at me, waiting for a reaction. I gave him nothing. She used to be creative, you know? Imaginative. I'll give her that, he said with a chuckle, like he was throwing me a bone. Always writing stories, making up characters, acting out these little skits as a kid. But somewhere along the line, something broke. He looked down at the table, shook his head like he pitied me. She never made it out of the starting blocks. And now she's, 41? Still working behind a cash register somewhere, still figuring it out. At some point, you stop rooting for someone and start accepting reality. My jaw stayed clenched. He couldn't see it, but I had my nails digging into the palm of my hand under the table. She's not dangerous or anything, Greg went on. She's just lost. Always has been. And honestly, I think this whole thing, this wild story, it's just her way of getting back in the spotlight. For once, I wasn't surprised. He'd been rewriting me for years. At birthdays, when I brought a store-bought cake, Tanya brought snacks. Keeping it simple, as usual. At Easter, when I didn't wear a dress. Still can't hang up the tomboy act, huh, kiddo? And at that 4th of July cookout, when I offered to help clean up, "Don't worry, we got it. Go relax. You're off the clock, right?" He winked, like it was a joke. Everyone laughed. They always laughed. Even when I was pushing 40, he still called me kiddo, said it with a smirk, like he was letting me play grown-up for a few hours before I went back to my sad little life. That was Greg's favorite thing, shrinking me down until I could fit in the palm of his hand. The help, the broke cousin, the weird one, the one who cried at his wedding. Kramer had gone quiet again, but I caught it. How his pen stopped moving, how his eyes narrowed just a bit. He was hearing the pattern now, not just in the words, but in the tone. Greg didn't think I was a threat. He didn't even think I was real. He was trying to erase me right in front of him. I leaned back in my chair and crossed my arms. Let him keep talking. Let him keep painting the version of me he needed to believe in, because the real version was about to knock the floor out from under him. Detective Kramer finally looked away from Greg and turned his eyes on me. "Miss Harris," he said slowly, "can you walk me through your work history? Just so I can understand the full picture here." I opened my mouth, but Greg jumped in before I got a word out. "She scanned coupons at Save More," he said, laughing like it was the punchline to a great joke. "Come on, she's a cashier, that's it. No need for the resume speech." I didn't look at him. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out the small black wallet I never carried unless I needed to. Snapped it open. Set it gently on the table. "Here's my ID," I said, voice steady. "I work for the Department of the Treasury, Office of Financial Crimes Enforcement." Greg blinked. He let out this weird bark laugh and leaned over the table to look at it, squinting like it might say birthday clown if he stared hard enough. "Okay," he said, dragging the word out, smirking. "That's hilarious. Where'd you get that made? Etsy?" "Looks pretty real." Kramer didn't laugh. He didn't even blink. He reached forward, picked up the wallet, flipped through the card and credentials like he knew exactly what he was looking at. Because he did, I watched his eyebrows tighten. He looked at me, then back at the ID. Then he stood. "I need to step out," he said, already heading to the door. "Won't be long." The door clicked shut behind him. Greg waited about 3 seconds, then looked at me, voice dripping with sarcasm. "So, what's the plan here, Tanya? You got a friend at Kinko's? Or is this some deep fantasy roleplay thing you picked up in therapy?" I didn't say anything. He stared at the door, shifting in his chair. "You can't be serious. This is a felony, you know. Impersonating a Fed? You'll get time for that." I leaned back and crossed my arms again, just like I did when I was undercover and the mark started sweating. Greg's foot tapped under the table. He rubbed his jaw, looked at the door, then at me. "Tanya, come on." His voice cracked just enough to let something slip through. "Seriously, what is this?" He wasn't laughing now. I tilted my head. "You okay?" He ran a hand through his hair. His face had changed. Less smug, more pale. He looked like a guy realizing the lights were about to turn on and show everything he didn't want seen. You don't actually." He swallowed hard. "You really work for the government?" I stayed quiet. The door opened. Detective Kramer walked back in, followed by another man in a suit with a badge clipped to his belt. Federal. Kramer set the ID back in front of me with care, not like he was returning a fake, but like he was passing something back to a peer. "We've verified her credentials," Kramer said calmly. "They're valid." Greg's jaw unhinged. He turned to the other agent, mouth open like he couldn't decide whether to beg or bark. Kramer sat back down. Greg's voice came out hoarse. "Wait, what the hell is going on?" I looked at him. 12 years, I said. "White-collar crime investigations, organized fraud, financial laundering, auto financing scams." I leaned in just slightly. "You know, the kind of stuff guys like you build dealerships on." Greg's mouth moved, but no words came out. "The studio above the laundromat," I said. "That was part of an operation. I wasn't poor. I was planted." He stared at me like I'd just told him I could fly. "You missed a lot of birthdays," he said, voice barely above a whisper. I shrugged. "Yeah, I was working." His hands clenched on the edge of the table. I watched it all hit him, like a wave he thought he could outrun but couldn't. He didn't see it coming. Nobody ever does. Greg looked like someone had yanked the floor out from under him and left him midair. No, this is a setup," he said, pointing between me and the agent who had verified my ID. "She called in a favor. This is some Prank or sting or something. Right? Right? No one answered. Kramer stayed calm, quiet, observant. The other agent crossed his arms and leaned against the wall, unreadable. Greg leaned across the table toward me, desperate now. You're telling me you've been working for the federal government this whole time? You? I didn't blink. 12 years, deep cover ops, financial crimes, shell corporations, laundering, loan fraud, offshore funneling, auto scams. The whole buffet. He flinched like the words were punches. No, you lived in a shoebox, above a laundromat. Correct. That was part of an operation. He let out a short, wild laugh. Like maybe if he laughed enough, reality would shift back in his favor. That wasn't real, he said, eyes wide. That shitty studio wasn't because you were broke? I shook my head. It was a surveillance position. The unit we were watching had two key targets who operated out of the barbershop on the corner and the check cashing place 2 blocks down. I needed to blend in. He stepped back like he couldn't breathe. I saw your fridge. You had mustard and tap water in it. Yeah, because I wasn't there to entertain guests, Greg. He looked at Kramer again, then the agent, then back at me. You missed my wedding. I know. You missed Ava's baby shower. You missed Thanksgiving. You missed, his voice cracked. You missed everything. I was working. That shut him up for a second, just long enough for the panic to spread across his face like a slow leak. You could see it settling in, the realization that all the assumptions, all the years he'd built his image on, how he stacked himself above me, weren't just shaky. They were fake. I saw his hand tremble as he ran it through his hair again. You were at Grandma's birthday, he said, like he was searching for proof that this wasn't real. You brought cupcakes. Yeah, I nodded. Had a GPS tracker in the car of her new boyfriend. He was moving stolen equipment through Pennsylvania. Greg's mouth dropped open. He sat down hard in the plastic chair, like his legs gave out. I thought you were struggling, he muttered. Mom said you couldn't hold down a job. She believed what I let her believe, I said. Just like you did. He looked at the floor, eyes darting, chest rising and falling too fast. I made fun of you, he said. For years. I called you a failure. I told people you were a joke. You weren't wrong, I said. You were just loud. He shook his head, almost to himself. You were always so quiet. You never argued, never corrected anyone, because that wasn't my mission. Greg's hands curled into fists on the table. His breathing was uneven now, like someone trying not to puke. I'd seen this before, in other ops, in other men, the moment when the mask slipped and they realized they were the mark all along. You were watching me. I looked him dead in the eye. Still am. Kramer stood up and nodded once at the agent by the door. Quiet coordination, nothing said out loud, but something had shifted permanently. Greg slumped lower in his seat. He wasn't talking anymore, just trying to figure out how his world had flipped while he was too busy mocking mine to notice. Greg's hands were still clenched on the edge of the table, knuckles white, breathing ragged. He kept glancing between me and the door, like someone was going to bust in and yell, "Gotcha!" and make it all disappear. That didn't happen. What happened was the door opened, and Detective Kramer walked back in, this time with another agent trailing behind him. Younger guy, serious eyes, jacket unzipped just enough to flash the badge. The air changed the second they stepped in. Kramer didn't waste time. We've confirmed Miss Harris's position, he said, voice flat, and we've matched the damage to the Range Rover in your garage with forensic debris recovered from the crash site. Paint transfers, blood evidence, headlight fragments. It all lines up. Greg didn't respond, just sat there, breathing through his mouth like he couldn't remember how to use his nose. Kramer kept going. We also pulled your dealership's service logs. There's a gap in inventory entries for the VIN of that vehicle. Never registered, never processed, but we traced the shell company that bought it, straight to an address linked to a corporation you registered in Delaware last year. The younger agent handed Kramer a folder. Kramer dropped it on the table. Greg didn't open it, just looked at me, face pale, eyes wide. It was an accident, he said, his voice breaking. I didn't mean to. I wasn't trying to hurt anybody. I stayed still. Greg turned to Kramer. I was coming back from a client dinner, all right? Had a couple drinks, yeah, but I was fine. I thought I was fine. I was tired, maybe. I didn't see them. The cyclist, he came out of nowhere. And the jogger, I swerved. I swear I swerved. He looked back at me like I might step in, like I might help him. I panicked, he whispered. I didn't know what to do. I left the car. I hit it. I I was scared. He started nodding like maybe if he agreed with himself enough, someone would forgive him. I got kids, he said, voice rising. 2 kids at home. You know that. Tanya, you know that. Please, I leaned forward, just enough for him to hear every word clearly. The victims had families too, I said. You didn't just panic. You made a decision. You left them in the street. You tampered with evidence. You lied to the cops. I let that sit for a second. And you lied about me. Greg's lips parted like he was going to say something else, but nothing came out. Kramer stood. Gregory Harris, at this time you are under investigation for vehicular homicide, evidence tampering, and obstruction of justice. You're not under arrest, yet, but I advise you to consult an attorney immediately. Greg's whole body slumped like someone had let the air out. Wait, just slow down. This can ruin me. This can ruin everything. I'll lose the business, the house, my name. He stopped himself, mouth twitching. I've built all of this. I didn't mean for any of it to happen this way. I sat back. That was the first true thing he'd said all day. No, he didn't mean for it to happen this way. He meant to get away with it. He meant for someone else to take the fall, or for it to just fade into the background like every other shady thing he'd done that the family turned a blind eye to. But this time, he didn't know I was watching. Greg looked around the room like someone might still save him. No one moved. Kramer gathered the folder and motioned to the agent, who stepped out to make a call. Greg stared down at the table, shoulders shaking. No more speeches, no more smirking. And I sat there, not saying a word, just watching, as the version of himself he'd spent years selling to everyone else started falling apart, right there in front of me. 2 days later, they cuffed Greg in front of his dealership. News crews got footage of him being loaded into the back of a black and white, face down, hands behind his back, sunglasses off. You could tell he tried to keep his head up, like he still had a shot at looking dignified. He didn't. The article dropped that afternoon. Local auto dealer linked to hit and run, facing federal charges. No mention of me, not a whisper. But the family? They lit up like I'd thrown a grenade into a reunion. My aunt left a voicemail that didn't even start with hi, just launched straight into, "So, we just saw the news and we were shocked, Tanya." Absolutely shocked. I mean, is it true? About the job? She didn't even finish her thought, just stammered through the rest, then hung up. An hour later, Uncle Ron called. I think we got off on the wrong foot a few years back, he said, like he hadn't spent 2 decades calling me trouble with a car payment. Look, I'm just calling to say, if you ever want to talk or clear the air, family's family. Click. Then came the texts. Cousins I hadn't heard from in years. Group chats full of, wait, what does she actually do? And did you know Tanya was like CIA or something? Even Ava chimed in. Was Greg seriously being watched by you? This whole time? OMG. But the one that stuck came late that night. My mother called. She didn't leave a message the first time, just rang, then rang again 5 minutes later. On the 3rd try, I picked up. She didn't say anything for a moment. I could hear the old clock ticking in her kitchen, the one she used to yell at when it was time for church. Then finally, she said my name. Not Tanny, not baby girl, not kiddo. Just plain, quiet, Tanya. I waited. I don't know what to say, she admitted. You fooled me. We thought we knew you. I exhaled through my nose. I never lied. She paused. But you never told us. You never asked. Silence again. That same kind of silence I remembered from when I was 17 and told her I wasn't going to prom. She hadn't argued then either, just sat with it. Let it settle. Her voice softened, but it didn't break. Are you good at what you do? I stared out the window, watched a man in a hoodie cross the street under a flickering street lamp. Very, I said, and that landed harder than anything else. No emotion, no apology, just a fact. She didn't say anything after that, just a soft, okay, like she was chewing on it, trying to see the shape of this person she thought she knew. We didn't hang up mad. We didn't hang up reconciled either, just hung up. Like 2 people who finally realized the conversation they'd been avoiding their whole lives was already over. After that call, I sat in the dark for a while. Didn't need music, didn't need closure, just let the quiet stretch. Because for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I owed anyone an explanation. Not my mom, not Greg, not a single one of them. All those years, forced smiles at family barbecues, nodding through backhanded compliments, pretending I didn't hear them whisper about how I just couldn't get it together. They thought I was fragile, unfinished, someone you pat on the head and move past. They had no idea I'd spent a decade taking down men who made Greg look like a damn clown. They thought success came with titles and pool parties, a corner office, a Facebook announcement, a spouse, and a mortgage. And anything outside that, it didn't count, didn't register. So yeah, when I showed up alone, when I left early, when I said I'm between jobs or just figuring things out, they filled in the blanks with their own story, the loser story, the one where I was invisible unless someone needed help folding chairs or slicing pie. But that was never about me. It was about them. Their fear of anything they couldn't label. Their need to rank people by how loud they clapped for themselves. Greg was loud, always had been. But when it came time to show up, to really show up, when it mattered, he ran. He covered his tracks. He lied. And then he begged. Watching him unravel wasn't just justice for what he did in that garage. It was justice for every dig, every smirk, every time he called me kiddo, like I was lucky just to be included. Now they know who I am. But I'm not waiting for their applause. I'm not waiting for their permission to stand taller. I never needed it. They thought I was nobody. Turns out I was the most important person in the room the whole time.